I've been having a lot of thoughts about various political and personal things. Yes, I bought a mic. I went to Goodwill with my friend last week. It's been about a week since I've moved into my new apartment, and she found a mic, so she picked it up as a joke and showed it to me like a little funny thing, and I was like, actually, I would like this. It was $15 at Goodwill. So one of the thoughts I've been having just now for like the majority of the day, I've been thinking about it, but anyway, I've been looking at various political things online, and I really like the setup of Tumblr specifically, as that's like my main social media or website that I go to for political commentary. I'll watch movies and stuff. Like right now I'm watching the God's Not Dead series, and I'm still deciding on whether or not I'll try to do some sort of video essay on the movies, because there's plenty of things I could talk about, but it's just a matter of like, there's 5 movies. So I'm only on the 3rd. But I'm getting into political stuff, so I'm, again, on and off. I do this several times a year. And one of them is autoandrophilia, specifically what I'm thinking about right now today, but in general, like feminist stuff. And I don't look at literature or historical accounts or anything. I know I need to. That would be, really helpful, but I go to Tumblr because I really, really like the format. It's like my favorite social media and website in general. Any kind of community thing that I can look online for people's opinions and stuff. Point is, Tumblr is pretty broad on what you can post. So there's a lot of stuff, and it's one of the main social medias anyway, so there's a lot of stuff. So I can find pretty much any opinion on there as long as you look through the right tags. So recently, I'm sure it's been around for a while, for like decades, but recently, for some reason, Tumblr is giving me posts in the feminist tags about, or like lesbian tags about force mask is the main tag, and it's the female version of forced feminization, and those things are, autogynephilia and autoandrophilia. Now, autogynephilia is talked about in such a disparaging way by feminists, which makes sense. They're talking about men and their sexualization of women's experiences and the sex stereotypes. But I rarely hear any discussion on social media about autoandrophilia, which I think should change, which is my point of this video. And it's, yes, force mask tags on Tumblr exist. It is a thing. It leads into, I haven't looked, I heavily oppose forced feminization and forced masculization because the basis of it is reinforcing sex stereotypes. And it's hard for me to look at that, people who support it and their opinions of it. So I avoid those tags on Tumblr. So I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on how many openly forced masks, or, aware of that particular kink they have. I don't know how many have transitioned, but autoandrophilia, I feel, is such a less discussed but common reason for the women who transition. And I see it primarily in the topics of butch-femme relationships. And now, like, the very basic opinion of lesbians defending the butch-femme dynamic is that, oh, it's women. It's women. It's not heteronormative because it's a same-sex relationship. How can it be heteronormative? And just, like, completely ignoring and completely wanting to get rid of any criticism of butch-femme relationships. And I don't think that's right. I think that's such an ignorant take, because there are arguments for it being heteronormative, including in relation to the topic of autoandrophilia. And there's one in particular that I can absolutely recall every once in a while seeing her post. Now, she uses he, him pronouns. I'm not doing that. But that's every time I see her account pop up. She's on Instagram, and I don't think she has a YouTube channel that she reposts her Instagram reels onto, but she's definitely, I don't know if she has a TikTok, but she's definitely on Instagram, posts frequently, and she is in a butch-femme relationship. She transitioned after getting into that relationship with her femme girlfriend, who she is now married to. She comes from a religious background, a religious upbringing, and her first marriage and relationship that she had children with was I think it was a religious relationship, and it was with a man who she was married to for decades. And when she accepted that she was same-sex attracted, or specifically a lesbian, she divorced him. She still talks to her children. Everything's good. They have a good relationship. But she transitioned after getting into that relationship with a feminine lesbian, and got on testosterone, is still on testosterone, had a double mastectomy. She has not had a phalloplasty, and I don't know if she's considering it. But it probably not, since she connects herself with the butch label, but still. And she calls herself a butch, but she's also a trans man. And it makes sense for her to lean into the simplicity of the trans man title, because she's transitioned and goes by he, him pronouns. And so in her professional settings, at her workplace, in general, she's fine being called a trans man, but she's such a supporter. What? I'm playing with the wire, so Cairo's looking at it. What? Go back to sleep. It's so dismissive to say that there is no issue with butch-femme relationships, because there is some sort of heteronormativity, and it's so dismissive to say no, not at all. These are women in these relationships. These are, same-sex exclusive relationships. You can't say that, they're heteronormative, because there's no men involved. And we don't live in a bubble, dude. Everyone is going to be influenced to some extent by everything in their environment. Like, there's no way that you can just say something's not heteronormative and that becomes a fact. So specifically in regards to transition and autoandrophilia, boy, that's a topic. Because it does, The topic of gender dysphoria is discussed, at least, there's pieces in feminism, radical feminism, when you look it up online, or gender critical overall. And it's, there's nuanced takes and there's sympathetic takes and whatnot, but it's primarily along the avenue of this is based on societal expectations and sex stereotypes and, the history of the patriarchy and all of that. And there's not much of any discussion of the sexual gratification aspect. Now, let's define autoandrophilia in and of itself. That's the gaining. You look it up online and it's sexual arousal. I'm not particularly a fan of that phrase because I think it really hones in on something, and it's a specific way people think of sexual gratification, and it limits the way people view things, whether it's daily activities or it's something that they go to in particular in sexual situations. And everyone has, in general, has the thing that they like to do, and that leads to a gratification aspect. There's things that people are more inclined to take interest in, specifically because there's this base level, integrated in their personality type of gratification. And it's hard to distinguish that from everyday behaviors. There's quite a strong demographic of asexual and asexual adjacent, like gray sexual or demisexual, whatever label they want to have or that they identify with. And there's quite a demographic of them in kink and fetish spaces and BDSM specifically that I've noticed, because that's one other political, I guess, just a general topic that I would like to have more of a information on, just to see how that plays into the world. And that's also, quite a radical feminist point of being against BDSM. There's one in particular YouTuber that I like to look at, because I'll do that with YouTube, and any social media where there's accounts that I don't follow, I'm not subscribed to, but I'll routinely go back to. There's YouTubers I'll cycle with, once a season that I'll go check up on. And there's one BDSM, pro BDSM, and she participates in it, asexual woman on YouTube. And she's pretty prominent in the BDSM community. And I really like her opinions on things, where it's nuanced opinions, and, she considers herself a feminist, a liberal feminist type, and she has videos of, bringing on other asexual people who participate in BDSM and are, known commentators within the community, and they have some level of authority with the education they've had regarding BDSM and how long they've been in the community. And so my problem with the phrase sexual arousal comes mainly from the way that they've described their personal experiences with asexuality and BDSM, and it's a gratification aspect. It's a satisfaction aspect. and because it's in a sexual context, it's sexual gratification. So I think the phrase sexual arousal does not encapsulate as well as the phrase sexual gratification or satisfaction. And so that goes into autoandrophilia and autogynephilia with transition, because it's that satisfaction. And with all this stuff, pro-transition, people online who are in butch-femme relationships, they will say that they transitioned because they're masculine, because, you know, they find gender euphoria, and there's this whole angle that opposes the true trans perspective, the true scum perspective. And it's that gender dysphoria and gender euphoria are different things. You can have gender euphoria, where you feel the satisfaction, whether you consciously connect it to the sex, you know, and that gender euphoria should be the marker of whether or not you decide to transition, instead of gender dysphoria. And it's obviously something I disagree with, because it's unconsciously promotes the autoandrophilia and autogynephilia, because there is gender dysphoria, and, you know, other things that go into gender dysphoria, like sex stereotypes and all of that. You know, like the reasons people transition. But on top of that, there is autoandro and autogyno, and people leave that out of the conversation for why people, both male and female, transition. And I think that's such a disservice to the people who do detransition or desist, and they do think critically about the reasons that they had gender dysphoria and the reasons they transitioned. It leaves out a big part of the conversation, in my opinion. And with butch-femme relationships, that goes into sex stereotypes, because it's really easy to fall into those expectations within a butch-femme relationship. Again, going back to the fact that it is ignorant to say that there is not heteronormativity to some extent in those relationships, and that sex stereotypes are not perpetuated in those relationships. So that's what I see with lesbians in the butch-femme relationships who are masculine, whether or not they consider themselves butch. A lot of them do. You know, they're strongly, like, definitively butch and masculine 24/7. And the ones who do transition, I do think it's an autoandrophilia aspect that makes them transition, as well as the heteronormativity aspect. And since it's not talked about in a sympathetic or understanding, nuanced way, and rather, because autogyno is by radical feminists, again, it makes sense why they're so against or, like, really combative when autogyno is brought up. I see it a lot with women with discussions regarding trans widows. You know, these outward behaviors that say, hey, this is autogyno. This isn't because of sex stereotypes. This is a sexual reason. Social media bringing up transitioning so much, and the fact that a lot of butch women and then feminine men, I'm sure, have gender dysphoria, but it's also, or experience gender dysphoria to such an extent where they consider transitioning. It seems pretty common with butch women. Again, you know, the reason dysphoria does exist is because of sex stereotypes. And so they're more inclined to just go with transitioning. But there is that autoandro aspect. I wish it was more discussed, autoandrophilia, because I do feel like it's, again, especially with, you know, the how expansive social media has become, and therefore how much more people are exposed to the idea of transitioning. I think it's such a disservice to the people who are both considering transitioning and to people who have already transitioned and now are detransitioning. I think it's such a disservice to their experiences, and to the origin of transitioning, to the origin of why they transitioned. I think it's such a problem that autoandrophilia, and then by extension autogynephilia, are not discussed to a higher extent. And I'm not well versed in the literature or feminist literature overall, so I can't give references or resources at this moment in time, but I would like to. I am interested in the topic, so I should look into the literature. So anyway, that's my commentary for today.